August 24th, 79 AD, 6 in the morning. Pompeian farmer Marcus froze as he drew water from the well outside his home. The water was hot, almost scalding. Even stranger was its color, a yellowish tint mixed with a sulphurous, metallic smell. That same morning, on the other side of the city, elderly priestess Claudia prayed in the temple with trembling hands. The vibrations coming from the ground, these weren't normal, but no one knew. No one suspected that in exactly 18 hours, Mount Vesuvius would erupt and 20,000 residents of Pompeii would become victims of one of history's most terrifying natural disasters. This is the story of their last normal day. Marcus set down the bucket he'd drawn from the well and tested the water with his fingers. Yes, it was definitely hot. His wife Livia poked her head out from the kitchen. "What's wrong, Marcus? Why are you standing there like that? The water is hot, Livia. It's never been this hot before." Livia approached and dipped her hand into the water as well. It really was hot, but even stranger was that metallic smell, as if iron were melting, perhaps. "There are hot springs underground," said Livia, shrugging. "It's always like that in Pompeii. The wealthy go there for the hot waters." Marcus nodded, but couldn't shake the growing feeling of unease within him. He had lived on this land for 40 years. Every morning he drew water from the same well. It had never been like this before. In the city center at the temple of Jupiter, Claudia knelt trembling on the cold marble. The elderly priestess felt vibrations coming from the ground as she prayed. These didn't seem normal. She was used to earthquakes. 17 years ago there had been a great earthquake. The city had been damaged but had recovered. This was different. The vibrations were rhythmic, as if a massive heart were beating underground. Vulcan, she whispered the god's name. She could feel that Vulcan, the god of fire, was angry. But why? Claudia stood and approached one of the temple's windows. She looked toward Mount Vesuvius. The mountain rose silently in the distance. Just as always, its slopes were covered with green vineyards and beautiful villas. The wealthiest Romans had built summer homes there. The volcano, known as Vulcan's home, had been sleeping for centuries. But Claudia could feel that Vulcan was awakening. Around 8 in the morning, Pompeii's great marketplace, the Forum, was preparing to begin its normal day. Merchants were setting up their stalls, slaves were carrying goods, but there was a strange tension in the air. Merchant Gaius Secundus stood at his fish stall, examining the fish brought that morning. Gaius was an experienced fisherman. He had been in this business for 40 years. But the fish brought that morning were different. Where were these fish caught? He asked the slaves who had brought them. "In the usual place, master, at the shore." "No," said Gaius, shaking his head. "These fish came from deep waters. Look at these species. These are deep water fish. They can't be found at the shore." The slave shrugged. "That's what the fishermen said, master. But to tell the truth, the fishermen's faces looked strange this morning too, as if they were frightened." Gaius frowned. Fish coming from deep waters meant there was a change in the sea. Either the water temperature had changed, or something was happening on the ocean floor. At that moment, Claudia entered the marketplace. The elderly priestess rarely left the temple on normal days, but today was different. She needed to speak with the people. "Claudia, mother," called Gaius. "Welcome. How are you, Gaius?" "My son," said Claudia, approaching. "You know the sea well. Have you sensed any change in the sea recently?" Gaius's face grew serious. "Yes, mother. Big change indeed. The fish are behaving strangely. Deep sea species are coming to shore. And sounds from underground. Have you heard any?" "I don't know about sounds, but there are vibrations, strong vibrations." Claudia nodded. Her fears were confirmed. On the other side of the marketplace, jeweler Lucius Caesius felt his unease growing as he opened his shop. He had had a very strange dream last night. In his dream, fire was raining from the sky. People were running, screaming. And that fire was black. Not normal fire, but fire mixed with ash. Just a dream. He muttered to himself, but he still noticed his hands trembling. Just then, his neighbor slave Alexis entered his shop. Alexis belonged to one of Pompeii's wealthiest families, but was a very intelligent young man. Marcus and Lucius often chatted with him. "Good morning, Master Lucius," said Alexis. But there was worry on his face. "Good morning, Alexis. Are you feeling strange today too?" "Yes, master. This morning my master's dogs wouldn't stop. They kept barking, all looking in the same direction toward Vesuvius." Lucius's heart quickened. "The dogs?" Yes, master. Both the dogs and the horses in the stable are very restless, as if they're afraid of something. Claudia approached at that moment and heard the two men's conversation. Animals, she said slowly, hear the voice of the gods before humans do. The midday sun blazed down on Pompeii with scorching heat, but this heat was different from normal. Summer heat. There was a sulfur smell in the air, very faint, but those who caught it felt uncomfortable. Wealthy merchant Marcus Holcanius Rufus called to his slave while eating lunch in his villa's garden. Quintus, why have the flowers in this garden wilted? Slave. Quintus looked up at the flowers. Indeed, the flowers that had been vibrant and beautiful yesterday evening were now wilted. Their leaves yellowed. I don't know, master. I watered them last evening. They were all fine. Marcus frowned. His garden was his pride, rare flowers brought from Rome, ornamental plants from Egypt. But now they all looked sick. There might be a problem with the soil, said Quintus. This morning the gardener said the same thing. He said the soil smells strange. Marcus stood and touched the garden soil. Indeed, the soil was warmer than normal, and that smell, metallic, slightly bitter, died at that moment. Family. Friend Decimus Lucretius Satrius Valens came to the villa. Decimus was from one of Pompeii's most respected families and organized gladiator games. Marcus, my brother, he called. Good to see you, but I have bad news. What happened, Decimus? The animals at the gladiator school, lions, tigers, they're all very restless. The trainers can't control them. They seem very frightened. Marcus's face darkened. Did you notice it too? Strange things are happening here as well, not just the animals, Marcus. Some of the slaves are saying strange things too. One of them claims he hears sounds coming from underground. Two friends looked at each other as people who had lived in Rome's great city. They tended not to believe in supernatural things, but they couldn't ignore what was happening before their eyes either. On the other side of the city, the farming family living near the Stabia gate was experiencing much greater anxiety. Farmer Gaius Polybius, who worked land very close to Vesuvius's slopes, was frightened by what he saw when he went to his field that afternoon. The water well seemed to be bubbling. It wasn't bubbling, but there were bubbles as if gas were coming out of it. When he tasted the water, he encountered a metallic, bitter taste. Minerva, he called to his wife. Come look at this. Minerva came and looked at the well. The water was indeed abnormal. Gaius, this water isn't drinkable. It might be poisonous. But last evening it was perfectly normal. But could it change so much in one night? The couple exchanged worried glances. If their well water wasn't drinkable, what would they do at that moment? Their neighbor Lucius Caesius came to their farm. Lucius had experienced similar problems in his own fields. Gaius, has your well gone bad too? Yes, are you having the same problem? And how? Both the water went bad and the soil. The soil is very hot. I can't step on it barefoot. Gaius bent down and touched the soil. Indeed, the soil was hot even though it wasn't under the sun. This isn't normal, Lucius. Something is happening. Underground. Like what? Gaius raised his head and looked at Vesuvius. The mountain still rose silently in the distance, but Gaius's unease was growing more and more. I don't know, but it's not good. As the afternoon sun warned Pompeii, warning. Signals from animals intensified throughout the city. Dogs barked incessantly, cats hid, birds left the city in flocks. Near the amphitheater, slave Titus, who was a horse keeper, was trying to control the horses in the stable. But the horses were very restless. They kept dancing on their feet, trying to rear up. Calm down, beauty, he murmured to his favorite horse. But the horse was acting as if it didn't recognize him. Its eyes were wide with fear. At that moment, his master Marcus Trebius came to the stable. Titus, why are the horses so restless? I don't know, master. They've been like this since this morning. They seem afraid, as if there's great danger. Marcus approached one of the horses, but the horse backed away and snorted. This isn't normal at all, said Marcus. This horse knows me, likes me. Why is it acting like this, master? There's something being talked about among the slaves. What is it? They know that animals act like this before earthquakes, but this time it's different. They don't seem just afraid of earthquakes. They seem afraid of something much bigger. Worry appeared on Marcus's face. Similar news was coming from other parts of the city. This couldn't be a coincidence. Very strange event occurred that day at the home of villa owner Aulus Umbricius Scaurus. Scoras was Pompeii's highest quality garum fish sauce producer, and always had many slaves working in his house. In the afternoon, one of the slaves, Drusilla, came running to her master. Master, the dogs in the garden. They're all stuck to the ground, barking, but no sound is coming out. Scoras was surprised. What do you mean? Come see, master. It's very strange. When Scoras went out to the garden, he indeed encountered a very strange scene. The four dogs in the garden had crouched to the ground, their mouths open but barking without making sound, as if they were very frightened by a great sound, screaming silently. What is this? He asked his slave. We don't know, master. They've been like this since this morning. They go into this position from time to time. Scoras bent down and touched one of the dogs. The dog was trembling. Whether from fear or excitement was unclear. At that moment, his young son Marcus came running. Father, look at the birds. Scoras raised his head. In the sky, hundreds of birds were passing over the city, forming almost a black cloud. But the birds weren't flying randomly. They were all flying in the same direction, away from Vesuvius. It's not migration season, murmured Scoras. Why are they behaving like this? Little Marcus clung to his father's hand. Father, I'm scared. Something is happening, isn't it? Scoras stroked his son's head. But the same fear was in his own heart. Yes, something was happening, but what? As the sun approached setting, Claudia could no longer remain silent. The elderly priestess knew she needed to speak with the people. She climbed the steps of the temple of Jupiter and rang the bell in her hand. The bell sound echoed through Pompeii's narrow streets. People began coming toward the temple to see what was happening. People of Pompeii, cried Claudia with her trembling voice. Vulcan is sending us a message. The crowd approached with curiosity. Claudia's prophecies usually came true. The earth trembles, she continued. Water boils. Animals flee. These are not coincidences. Someone from the crowd called, What should we do, mother? Tears appeared in Claudia's eyes. The bad feeling inside her was growing stronger. Pray to the gods for sacrifices and be prepared. Prepared for what? Claudia looked at Vesuvius. She saw a very faint, almost invisible cloud of smoke rising from the mountain's peak. Her heart quickened. Vulcan is awakening, she said quietly. May the gods protect us. The crowd saw Claudia's fear-filled eyes and unease spread. Some immediately ran to their homes to gather their valuable possessions. Others stayed at the temple and began to pray. In the wealthy part of the city, Lucius Caesius gathered his family that evening. Listen, he said to his wife Julia and 2 children. Strange things are happening in the city today. Perhaps we should go to Rome for a few days. Julia looked at the worry on her husband's face. Is it this serious, Lucius? I don't know, Julia, but yes, it could be serious. Even Mother Claudia warned us. His son Gaius asked, Father, is Vesuvius going to erupt? Lucius ruffled his son's hair. Vesuvius has been sleeping for centuries, my son, but just in case, we should be prepared. The family immediately began packing their bags, but for most Pompeians it was already too late. When night darkness covered Pompeii, the situation had gotten much worse. The vibrations from the ground were now so strong that dishes on tables were shaking. Farmer Marcus couldn't sleep that night. He turned to his wife Livia. Let's go to Rome early tomorrow morning. Why, Marcus? This is our home. What I saw today, nothing good. The water is boiling hot. The soil is warm. The animals are like crazy. This could be a warning. Livia took her husband's hand. Are you afraid? Marcus gave an honest answer. Yes, I'm afraid. At that moment, they heard the sound of horse hooves from outside their house. Marcus opened the window and looked. In the street, several wealthy families had gotten into their carriages and were hastily leaving the city. Look, Livia, they're leaving too. Then let's go too. But for most Pompeians, leaving wasn't easy. Families who had put down roots in the city, their businesses, their animals, it was difficult for them to suddenly leave everything and go. The great rebellion broke out that night at the gladiator school. The gladiators had seen the animals' behavior and were frightened. Get us out of here, they shouted to their coaches. A great danger is approaching. But Gladiator Master Quintus Manius Rufus didn't listen to them. You're talking nonsense, he said. Nothing will happen. One of the gladiators, experienced warrior Britannicus, stood up. Master, I've seen many battles. I know how to sense danger. There's a very great danger here tonight. What kind of danger? I don't know. But the ground is shaking, the animals are crazy, the air is different. This isn't before a battle. This is something much worse. Quintus shook his head. Do gladiators fear? Your job is to fight. We fight enemies, said Britannicus, but how do we fight nature? That night no one in Pompeii could sleep peacefully. People of all ages waited for morning with anxiety. But when morning came, it wasn't the terrible thing they expected, but an unusually calm day that began. The morning of August 25th found Pompeii unexpectedly calm. Yesterday's vibrations had subsided, the waters had normalized, even that metallic smell in the air had diminished. When Marcus woke up in the morning, he almost smiled at his fears from the night before. Look, Livia, he said while drawing water from the well, the water is at normal temperature. Livia was also relieved. So yesterday was just a strange day. The city's people were also beginning to relax in a similar way. In the marketplace, stalls were opening normally, people were continuing their daily business. But Claudia was still worried. The elderly priestess felt that this calm was deceptive. This is the calm before the storm. She murmured alone in the temple. Vulcan is gathering his breath. At midday, someone noticed light smoke rising from Vesuvius's peak, but the smoke was so faint that most people thought it was a cloud. Farmer Marcus looked up at Vesuvius while working in his field. There really was something at the peak. Was it smoke or was it a cloud? Strange. He murmured, I've never seen anything like this at the mountain's peak before, but he didn't worry. The previous day's fears had passed out. In the afternoon hours, the situation began to change. The smoke at Vesuvius's peak became denser. This time everyone could see it wasn't a cloud. When people shopping in the forum looked up at the mountain, they saw that the smoke coming from the peak was darker and denser. What is this? Someone asked. I don't know, but it looks like smoke. Is it coming from Vesuvius? People were looking at each other with curiosity but hadn't panicked yet, because no one alive had seen a volcano erupt. Until then, Vesuvius was known only as a mountain famous for its fertile soil and beautiful scenery. Around 5 o'clock, the smoke clouds became even denser. Now everyone could see it. Dark gray, almost black smoke clouds were rising from Vesuvius's peak. Claudia came out of the temple and looked at the mountain. Her heart was beating wildly. It's beginning, she whispered. Vulcan is awakening. Around 6 o'clock, as the sun approached setting, the people of Pompeii encountered the greatest shock of their lives. Mount Vesuvius erupted with a tremendous roar. The explosion sound was so powerful that it was heard even in Misenum, 150 kilometers away. In Pompeii, the sound was so violent that many people temporarily went deaf. Marcus was working in his field when he suddenly collapsed to the ground. His ears were ringing. The world seemed to be shaking. What's happening? He tried to shout, but couldn't even hear his own voice. When he raised his head, the scene he saw frightened him. Vesuvius's peak had literally exploded and a massive black cloud was rising toward the sky. The cloud was growing and spreading very rapidly. At that moment, great panic began in the city. People ran into the streets screaming. No one understood exactly what was happening, but everyone felt that a great danger had begun. The volcano is erupting, someone shouted. Impossible, another replied. Vesuvius is a dead volcano. But the giant black cloud in the sky was real. It was rapidly approaching Pompeii. Lucius Caesius stood in front of his house with his family, watching the sky in horror. Too late, he said to his wife. We can't leave the city now. That cloud is approaching too fast. Julia squeezed her husband's hand. What will we do, Lucius? We'll stay home. May the gods protect us. About an hour had passed after the eruption when the first ash began falling on Pompeii. Initially they were light, small particles like dust. People hoped this would only be temporary, but the ash rain rapidly intensified. Around 7 o'clock, the sky completely darkened, as if night had fallen, and the ash particles became bigger, denser. Claudia knelt in the temple, raising her hands to the sky and praying. Vulcan, calm your anger. Your people are innocent. Forgive us. But the ash kept falling. A thin layer of ash began forming on the temple's marble floor. Wealthy merchant Marcus Holcanius Rufus had panicked in his villa with his slaves. The sounds of ash coming from the villa courtyards were terrible, a constant ticking, as if it were raining. Close the windows, he shouted to the slaves. Don't let any ash inside. But the ash was so fine that it seeped in through the smallest cracks. Soon the inside of the house also began filling with ash dust. Slave Quintus approached his master. Master, the horses in the stable are very frightened. They're trying to escape. Let them escape, said Marcus. We should escape too, actually. Where to, master? There's an ash storm outside. Marcus couldn't answer. Really, where could they escape to? Toward midnight, the situation became much worse. Now not only ash, but pumice stones began falling. These stones were the size of small pebbles, but hard and painfully falling to the ground. People, caught in the streets, tried to take shelter under canopies, under eaves. But the pumice stones were piercing through roofs. When Farmer Marcus and his wife Livia realized their house's roof was beginning to collapse, they experienced great fear. The roof won't hold, said Marcus. These stones are too heavy. What will we do? We must stand in the strongest part of the house, next to the walls. They crouched in the corner of their house's single room and embraced each other. Outside there were terrible sounds, wind, stone, rain, distant screams. The situation at the gladiator school was dramatic. The gladiators were now trying to escape, but the masters wouldn't let them. No one will leave, shouted Quintus Manius Rufus. You'll die outside. But Gladiator Britannicus rebelled. We'll die here too. The roof is collapsing indeed. The gladiator school's roof was beginning to collapse under the weight of pumice stones. Huge stones were falling into the hall. Everyone leaned against the walls, shouted Britannicus. Don't stand under the roof. The gladiators were experienced warriors, but they had never encountered this kind of enemy. This wasn't an enemy they could fight. Toward morning, Pompeii was unrecognizable. The streets were filled with a mixture of ash and pumice 1 to 2 meters high. Most houses' roofs had collapsed. Elderly priestess Claudia was still praying even as she drew her last breath in the temple. My gods, forgive your people. Claudia's voice was cut off. The old woman was Pompeii's last priestess and had performed her duty until the final moment. Villa owner Marcus Holcanius Rufus had taken shelter with his family in his villa's strongest room. But now they were having difficulty breathing. The amount of ash in the air was too much. Daddy, said his little daughter Claudia, I can't breathe. Marcus took his daughter in his arms. Calm down, sweetheart. It will be over soon. But Marcus also knew it wouldn't be over. These were their final hours. On the other side of the city, Farmer Marcus and his wife Livia were embracing each other, trying to be together until the last moment. I love you, Livia, whispered Marcus. I love you too, my husband. Then silence. Pompeii's last sounds also ceased on the morning of August 26th. As the sun filtered weakly through the ash clouds, Pompeii no longer existed. The vibrant city where 20,000 people lived had become a giant cemetery overnight. But this wasn't the end of this story. This was only the beginning. Because Vesuvius's ash hadn't just destroyed Pompeii, it had also preserved it. The mixture of ash and pumice had essentially mummified the city, transferring every detail to future generations. The water bucket Marcus had drawn that last morning would be found there exactly 2,000 years later. The precious stones in Lucius's jewelry shop, the incense pot in Claudia's hands as she prayed, the weapons the gladiators used as they drew their last breaths, all would be preserved like a time capsule. When archaeologists discovered Pompeii in 1748, they didn't just find an old city, they found a moment frozen in time. Traces showing people's final moments, final movements, final thoughts. The hot water Marcus drew from the well that morning was the first sign that Vesuvius was awakening. The vibrations Claudia felt were indicators that the volcano was preparing to erupt. The animal's fear was proof that nature sensed danger before humans. But at that time, no one knew what these things meant. For the first time in human history, humanity would see the complete details of a volcanic eruption recorded. Pompeii's final 24 hours wasn't just a natural disaster story. This was the story of how small and defenseless humanity is against nature, but also how love, courage, and solidarity continued until the very end. Marcus and Livia's embrace at the final moment, Claudia's prayers until her last breath, the gladiators' attempts to protect each other. These were humanity's most beautiful aspects done, and today, when we walk through Pompeii streets, we don't just see ancient stones, we see those people's traces, their stories, courage and love in their final moments. Vesuvius took Pompeii that night, but Pompeii's spirit, its stories, and the lessons it teaches still live on, because sometimes great tragedies preserve the most valuable stories for us. And this story of Pompeii's final 24 hours reminds us of this. Every day is precious. Every moment matters, because none of us can know what tomorrow will bring, but our love, our courage, and our devotion to each other, these transcend time and live forever. Just as it was on Pompeii's last day,